Hello, my name is Connor, and I'm going to be showing you how to make a typewriter effect for a dialog box interface in Godot Engine 4.6. So right now, as you can see, I have my project manager up. So first step is creating a new project. So you can click create at the top left here, just create right here, create new project. So go to new window, new game project. I'm going to rename this to typewriter underscore tutorial, and then project path. For some reason, Windows 11 insists on putting it in the documents for OneDrive. I'm not doing that. I have a dedicated Godot folder, so I'm just going to select that. You can keep it wherever you want if you want to, but render. Uh, so, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. You can keep it where you want if you want to, but it's fine regardless. So renderer, forward plus keep it there. That's fine. Version control metadata so for my purposes, I'm not gonna have that there, but if you want to, that's fine. Doesn't really affect anything. But so right now we're just gonna create. Wait for it to boot up. So before we do anything with the scene tree here or anything here, we're going to go to the top left that says project, click on project settings, new window pops up, and then on the left here is a thing called display. Go to the thing that says window below it. So there's the header here that says size, and then viewport width and viewport height. These are the two things that we want to edit right now. So for later on, when we're setting the dialog box sizes, um, if we do not edit the width and height for the viewport, the dialog box is going to look like it's cut off on the right side, like to the right side of the viewport, like the viewport when you're testing the game. So that's not what we want. So what we're going to do here is we're going to change it to 1920 by 1080. You can make it another resolution, though do note that when you're inputting the sizes for the dialog boxes and the margins and whatever we're putting in, you're going to need to find your own values for that line up with the screen and how you want it. So if you're doing that, just keep that in mind. But if you're not and you're keeping it at 1920 by 1080 like I am, you should be fine. So there we go. Viewport width and height, we set that. And now we can create a root node. So we can go over here to the left and make a user interface. Since it's just going to be UI, we don't need anything fancy like a 2D scene. So we already have our root node here, control, going to rename that to dialog root. And let me just scroll up here so that we're a bit centered. So before we do anything else here, we're going to go to the inspector with dialog root selected and go to the dropdown that says layout. And we're going to check the option here that says anchors preset. It is a full rectangle, and that's what we want. We want it to be full rectangle, so it should be fine. And then we're going to go to the dropdown that says transform and make sure it's the same as the resolution we set in the project settings, which it is. It's 1920 by 1080. That is what we need to know and see, and that's all we got to edit for dialog root. So right now we're going to right click on dialog root and add a child node to it. We're going to add a margin container right here. And that margin container, see it popped up right there, we're going to rename it to dialog box. That is what's going to hold the dialog box and all its subsequent components. Dialog box. So first thing we want to do here is center out the dialog box before we resize it. So notice that how it's stuck in the green arrows, there's the anchor. So we want the anchor to be centered along over here. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to layout here in the inspector, and you're going to go to, there's a thing that says layout mode here. You're going to change that from position to anchors. So now you have another thing that pops up here that says anchors preset. It's on the top left for now, so what we want to do is it be at the center top. So you go down here, there's an option that says center top. Now it's at the center top. But you may notice that this is still too small for any dialogue. So what we want to do is we want to go to this transform here, and we're going to change the size. And I've already figured out what the size is. So if this is, again, if you're using a different resolution, you're going to need to figure this out so that it looks even. But I've already roughly figured it out for 1920 by 1080. So the X is 1400 by 256. There we go. So now you may notice this is looks cut off because for some reason the anchor is anchored in the left corner of that. That's fine. We can fix that by going back to anchor presets here and changing it to center. It centers itself, and then changing it back to center top. There we go. So before we do anything else, I just want to get over the purpose of the anchors. So the anchor basically, the purpose of these anchors here is that regardless of what resolution a system is running at, the anchor makes sure that UI elements stay in the same place as they usually do. So if this is no longer, if this decides to run at a resolution of 2560 by 1440, this will stay in the center regardless. So we've set that up now. So now we're finished with this node here, the dialog box node. We're going to right click it and add a new child node, and it's going to be a panel. This is just going to add a gray background here, or dark gray, dark black, just to show that, hey, this is a dialog box. Also, I almost forgot, make sure to save. Save your scene. There we go. Okay, so if you do want to make it a different color, I'm not sure, but if you go here in the drop down, there's a thing called theme overrides, styles, and there's a thing called style box. You have to make a new one, but you can, if you want to make it a flat color, you go to style box flat, and then you edit the color from there, and then apply it to the panel with the checkbox. But we're not doing that right now, since this is just, a tutorial. We're not going to do anything too fancy. So now we're done with the panel. Go back to dialog box, right click, add a child node, and we're going to add another margin container to it. So now, there we go. Dialog box has two components, the panel and margin container under it. So what we're going to do with this margin container is we are going to edit it. So we're going to click on it. We're going to go to the drop down here that says theme overrides, constants, and then there's 4 checkboxes. I want you to check all of them. And what we're going to do is we're going to set margins. And you're going to see what this is for in a second. So each margin top, so if you look here, it says left, top, right, bottom. Each of those should be 32. You can make it your own size if you don't like this type of size, but this is what we're working with here for now. And now we have that set. We're going to go to the margin container here, right click it, add a child node, and we're going to add a panel. There we go. Now, if I just select this here, you can actually see now that this looks like it has a border, and that the inner panel here is like where you would actually put the text. That's kind of what the aesthetic we're going for here is we have a border, and then we have the inside square rectangle here that actually shows the text. So right here at the panel, so this is, we got the inner panel, everything's fine. So we're going to create another child for this outside margin container. And what that is going to be is it's going to be a horizontal box container, or just an HBox container, as known internally here in Godot Engine, HBox container. I'm not going to name it anything fancy, just keep it as HBox container. And for the HBox container, we're going to add another, we're going to click on it, add a child node, and we're going to add a label. This label is going to store the text for the dialog. So label is going to be renamed text. We're going to add the placeholder text to your text. If you can see, it's in the middle there. There we go. We want to edit this so that the text here is now at the top left of the box here. So before we do that, I'm going to go through a bunch of steps here for getting this set up. So make sure you clicked on the label and that you're at the inspector here. So first of all, we're going to go to the layout. We're going to go to layout. And then we're going to go to this drop down called container sizing. There are 2 options here. You don't need to worry about stretch ratio. Horizontal and vertical. You go to the drop down there and you click shrink begin for horizontal. Don't worry about the expand there. Checkbox there. Don't worry about that. And go to vertical and also make it shrink begin. Now that allows for the text to be at the top left where it should be. Now that's set aside. We're going to go back up and go to auto wrap mode. We're going to set that to Word. Basically, what auto wrap mode allows for is that when the text like hits a certain like point here where like it'll go back, it'll go down. It's like basic word processing stuff. So there we go. But you also notice here when we set that, we have a node configuration warning, basically saying you must have a custom minimum size configured to work correctly inside the container, meaning we have to make a box here for the word wrapping to work. So if we go to layout again, you'll see a thing that says custom minimum size. So it's 0 and 0. We need to change that. So if you go, we're going to take the measurements from the panel here. So if we go to panel, click the panel, and go to transform, you'll find that the size here is 1336 by 192. So we're going to copy that, and we're just going to put in 1336 by 192 here in custom minimum size for the label. And there we go. That works now. We don't have a node configuration warning. And one more thing, we are going to change the font because the font is extremely tiny. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to Theme Overrides, Font Sizes, click the check mark here, and I'm going to change the font size to 48. There we go. So now we have set that up. And oh yeah, we have one more thing too, is before we do anything else with the logic, we're going to add a child node to the dialog root. So go back to the dialog root and add a child node. We're going to add a timer and rename it to dialog timer. This will be important later, but just keep in mind, this is what your scene tree should look like. Make sure you save, and let's just hit play to make sure everything's where it should be. So please confirm no means scene, select current. There we go, text. So now we actually get into the functionality. So what you're going to do now is we're going to make a script. We're going to attach it to the dialog root node. So you can either right click it and scroll, like go down here to attach script, or just click the scroll icon here at the plus sign. I'm just going to right click it and do attach script. So we get a window here. Language, GDScript, that's fine. It inherits control. We want to change that to inherits a node. Template, node default, it's fine. Built-in script, do not check that on. Path, if you want to change the name, you change it here for the script, but we're going to keep it. We're going to create it. Here we go. Now we got the script here. Save it. There we go. And so before we do anything, we're going to set up an input. So basically what I want to do for the functionality right here is that when you press E, the dialog box will start off not shown in the scene. And then when you press E, the dialog box pops up, and then it starts doing its typewriting. So to have the input for that be registered, we need to set that up before we put anything in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the top left here. It says Project Settings. There's a tab next to General called Input tab. Go there. Click on the text box for Add New Action, and we're going to name this new action not inherits, Interact. Interact, and then click Add. Now we have that. Don't worry about the dead zone here. That doesn't really matter. It's not something you need to worry about. But we do need to set a key. We're going to set the E key. So we're going to add event. So you can find the E key by going to the drop down here and looking for it manually, or you can do filter, click here, filter by event, and it's listening for the input, so just press E. There we go. So now we have the E key, physical E key, registered. You can make it any key you want, but I'm doing the E key because it's just easy and it's what I'm familiar with. Save. So now we have that set up. So now we can work on the logic for this. So first of all, we need to have a variable at the top here that references the dialog box itself, or the dialog, the node here. So dialog box equals self. So we'll have that there. We're going to need that later, but it's just good to have that. Well, I say we're going to have that later, but we're going to need it right now, actually, because what we want to do is hide the dialog box so that we can have the input be taken and the input, when pressed, will show the dialog box. So first, we have to go to the ready here. So when the scene starts, the ready will already have hid the dialog box. So dialog box, dialog underscore box dot hide. Very simple. So that's hidden. You can just check it. Yep, there we go. So now we're going to actually get the player input. So for that, we need to do function underscore input parentheses event, and then so that's how we get the inputs. So we're going to have a if statement now that says if event.is action pressed, and then you're going to reference the exact name of the action you put in the input map. So in interact, there we go. If that is pressed, then dialog box dot show. There we go. So now, if we press E, dialog box shows. Doesn't turn off though, that's fine, we don't really need that. We just want to know that this works. Okay, so now we're going to, we also need to go back to the top here and make a reference to the text box here itself, because we need to have a reference for the text box to actually put the text that we want in there for the typewriting. So what we're going to do is make it an onReady variable, text underscore dialog equals, and then what you can do, this is very easy. What you can do is you can go back to the scene tree here, drag, so hold and drag, you just drag and drop the text here, and then it basically puts out the whole, pathing from the scene tree there. Okay, so now what we want to have, before we do any of the typewriting functionality, we need to make another function, and that is for clearing the label text. Because right now it's got a placeholder text that says text. You could get rid of that and then just have the dialogue, like make the function for the typewriter. But for these purposes, we're having a clear label, like a clear function for the label here. Because if you do want to implement this later down the line, it's nice to have that just in case, like just when you need to like refresh the dialog box. So function, we're going to make a comment, clears the text in the label, and then func clear label text. And this is simple. It's just if the text underscore dialog dot text. So that if the text in the label. So if the length. So if the length of the text in the label is greater than 0, meaning if it has anything but an empty string in there, you need to change it to an empty string. So text underscore dialog dot text is equal to empty string. There we go. That's all we need to do. So we're going to call that here too. Put it in the input event, clear label underscore text. There we go. And we're going to test it. So, oh, whoops. Oh, I forgot to put a colon there. There we go. Sorry about that. Make sure to put a colon at the end of your if statements and your functions. And now, there we go. Press D, no text at all. So that works. Okay, now we get into the real like meat and potatoes of this. We're going to actually make the typewriter function, the function that writes the dialogue you want to write onto the text box, or the label, I should say. So make a comment writes the dialogue onto the label. And we're going to name this function typewriter, just typewriter. Very simple. And don't forget to put the colons there. There we go. And in here, we're going to store, for this purpose, we're just going to store the variable like that has the sentence we want to put on the label here. So variable dialog underscore, nope, that's not an underscore, underscore sentence is equal to, and then my message is going to be something long so that we can make sure that the word wrap is working. Testing, dot, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, exclamation point. This is the typewriter effect. Hello. Hi, how are you? And then, there we go. Okay. Nope, don't do that. There we go. Okay. Save. So now we have that. Now we can actually work on the logic here that does the typewriting effect. So make another comment. Type writes each letter on the label. So what we're going to do here, and what I found works, is we're going to have a for loop that iterates through this sentence, each character of this sentence, and when it until it reaches the end of that, until it reaches the end of the sentence. It's going to iterate along that. It's going to add each character, which is now in a separate index, to the text label. So what that's going to look like is for j in dialog underscore sentence dot length, and then text underscore dialog dot text, and then plus equals dialog sentence index j. There we go. So if this is what's going to be like part of the logic for the typewriter effect. Now, if we leave it here, it's not going to work the way that you think it would with the typewriter effect. We need something else. We need to utilize the timer. Before we do that, let me just explain why. This, despite it iterating over the characters, it's going to do it at a fast rate, so much that it's just going to do it all, looks like it does it all at once. So let me just show you. So make sure we go back to input event here and put the function here so that it actually calls it. So typewriter, and then test it out. So yeah, see, it's got the message there, but it's not doing the typewriter effect. So we need something to delay each loop in that for loop. We need to delay it by a certain amount of time so that you can actually see that typewriter effect. And that's where the timer here comes in. So what we're going to do is we're going to reference that. So we're going to make another onReady variable. Just name it timer. And you're just going to drag and drop. Simple as that. Simple as that. So now we're going to add the logic for the timer. So first of all, we're going to create a variable that's called delay and set it to 0.01. I'll explain what this means in a second here. And then we're going to set the timer to stop. This is important because this is a fail-safe, because when the timer starts, the timer will start, and when it hits here I'll say the timer start. Well, I don't do that yet actually, but we'll have a timer.start in a couple lines down, but when that starts after the first loop, we want to have a fail-safe just in case the timer doesn't stop despite everything all the parameters we set in place to make sure it stops. So on that second loop it'll stop and then it'll restart. So having this here just makes sure that we don't have timers like unsynced. So now we're going to set the timer.wait time. So the time until it's wait time to delay. And basically what delay does is it dictates the speed of the typewriter effect. I found that 0.01 is like the sweet spot for me, at least. You can play around with it, but 0.01 is good. So wait time, and then we're going to set another thing called timer.one_shot, timer one shot to true. So one shot basically states that the timer will stop after it's done. It's not going to restart. This is another kind of like fail-safe thing. It's just not going to, if we have it on false, then this timer will continue to go even after it's done iterating through this. We don't want that. So, and then finally, we're going to have the thing that says, hey, start the timer. So we have all these prerequisites here just for later in the loop. And then the first time it's going to go over these, but it's not really going to, it's just going to set the delay and all that. But it's going to start the timer. And then everything else, like this and this, that's what matters after the first loop. But we're also going to await the timer. So we're going to make sure, we're going to wait for the timer to time out before we go to the next one, the next character. So when the timer's done, go to the next character. And so, make sure you have your typewriter function here in the input event. This is the logic that basically allows for the typewriter effect to work. So if we open this up, press E, see it works. If you wait for it to like finish, it'll work if you press E again. But here's an issue. If you keep pressing E while it is typewriting, this happens. Notice how at the end it just kind of, it almost does like, is able to get a comprehensible statement out there. But why this is happening? Why is this happening? This is happening because we have not disabled input while the typewriter is doing its thing. So every time we keep pressing E, it's doing this again. It's clearing the label text and it's doing the typewriter, but it's also doing the timers again. So it's basically going, it's concatenating, I don't want to say concatenating, but it's a weird way to put it because it's not really, but it's going over itself and just making a bunch of gibberish out of the same message. And then around the end, it kind of tapers off and it kind of, because of all the timers finally stopping. But yeah, we don't want that. So the solution to this is just, 2 lines of code and very simple. It's called set_process_input. So, and that basically, if you set it to false, in this case, we're going to go to the beginning here of right under the if statement here, set_process_input, and then set it to false. Oops, not falsely. False. That means that it's not going to accept any input. It will not accept the E key. It's not going to, nothing. So it's not going to overwrite over anything because if you keep spamming it until the end here, well, not until the end because it won't do that. What we need to do here is go back to func typewriter, make sure you're out of the for loop here, so just one indent in this case, and set the process input to true after it's done. Whoops. So now, when it's done with this, it'll allow you to press E again to refresh it. So let's just check and make sure that works. So press E. And then I'm just going to keep pressing E. See, it's not doing anything. You can't see it, but I'm pressing E a bunch of times. It is not doing anything until it's done with the message. But yeah, this is working. This is all you need to know on how to make a simple typewriter effect in Godot. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Bye.